Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to everybody that's come tonight to watch committee. Welcome to everybody that is joining online. Welcome members and welcome officers. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chairman, there are four. Councillor Buckmaster, Councillor Burt, Councillor Carter and Councillor Copley. Councillor Connolly is substituting for Councillor Carter, and then Councillor Adams is substituting for Councillor Copley. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at the beginning, I'd like to introduce everybody that's on this top table. I'm Yvonne Estop, I'm the chair of Development Management Committee. Stephen Watson is the vice chair. Then we have professional planners, David Lamb, Scott Hackner, Neil Button. And we have our legal advisor, Rani Gutara, and our Democratic Services Officer, Peter Mannings, Head of Planning, Sarah Saunders, Jackie Bruce, Section 106 Officer, and we have Chris Martin, and we have Charlie Thompson, welcome, from HCC Growth and Infrastructure Unit, and Matt Armstrong, who is Herts County Council Highways. So welcome to all of you. Matt Armstrong is online. So when we hear from Matt, it will be on the screen and through the loudspeakers. So we have the minutes. Item 4 is the minutes of the meeting on the 7th of February. Chairman's announcements. Well, there are none. There are none of those. Oh, are there any declarations of interest?
I'm a councillor on Hertford Town Council, and I was present at a meeting last September when we looked at Archer Spring development and made comments, but it doesn't influence anything today. Thank
you, Councillor Connolly. So going on to item 4, which are the minutes of the 7th of February meeting. Does anybody here have any comments or amendments on the minutes? I'd like to say that the minutes have been very good for DMC. They are noticeably shorter this time. So I think we need to acknowledge that this records the main information about the meeting. If people want to know more about what happened, there's a recording online that's available for a long time afterwards. But thank you for doing the minutes. I have one small point to make about this, which is that for the planning application, I think we also agreed to add to condition 13 details to be submitted of bin locations. Condition 13. So we go on to item 5, which is the planning. Oh, of course, yeah. Could somebody give proposed? So Councillor Devonshire proposes, Councillor Stowe every time. Councillor Stowe seconds. Thank you. All those who agree that the minutes are a good record. And anybody that doesn't agree, and anybody abstaining? Thank you. So we go on to item 5, which is the planning applications before us, and the first application is number 3/190790, and this is an outline application for up to 342 homes of a range of size and type, together with associated access, parking, public open space, and amenity space. Access and scale to be determined in brackets layout, appearance, and landscaping, reserved for future determination. And this is at the land next to Archer Spring, on the land north of Welwyn Road, Hertford. And this is a strategic part of the council's strategic housing strategy, and it's the allocated site Hart 3. Now, before we start, at 3:30 this afternoon, planning officers received an email from the planning agent asking whether Jeff Springer and Duncan Parr could address the committee regarding application 3190790 outline. Following the council's constitution, paragraph 6.4.2 sets out that all speaking requests must be made by 5 p.m. 2 working days prior to the meeting. So under the constitution, the committee can depart if it sees fit from the speaking arrangements on certain applications in accordance with paragraph 6.4.5 of the constitution. The committee could agree to depart from the speaking arrangements and would need to vote on this. So could I have, if you are minded, could I have a member that is prepared to propose a motion that Jeff Springer and Duncan Parr are able to speak? So the motion, we have no motion, and I'm afraid that. Okay. I will propose from the chair that we allow Jeff Springer and Duncan Parr. They are the planning agents for the application. So I propose that we let them speak. Would anybody second that? So Councillor Connolly. So can I see all those in favour of this, please?
Thank you. Hands up.
And those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. So that is carried, and we will allow those to speak. Can I ask Scott, please, Hackner, to introduce this item for us?
Thank you, Chair. Everyone hear me? Good evening, Chair and members of the committee and those attending. I'm pleased to present and put before you a strategic outline application Archer Spring, land north of Welwyn Road in Hertford under planning reference 319-790 AOUT, which obviously is the outline, for up to 342 residential dwellings of a range of size and type, together with the associated access, parking, public open space, amenity space. Access and scale to be considered only, with layout, appearance, landscaping reserved for future determination. This application was received in early 2019. Next slide. This slide shows a strategic application site outlined in red in plan form on the left, and on the right, the site in the aerial view. The site itself is undeveloped land comprising mainly scrubland to the west of Hertford town and forms part of the new urban edge with Sill Farm Estate to the east. Next slide. This slide shows the site features and wider surrounding context, included Archer's Spring Woodland, where the site gets its name, of course. The designated local wildlife site in the Greenbelt and Panshanger registered Grade 2 starred listed park and grounds that lies beyond the site, south of Welwyn Road. Next slide. This slide shows the site constraints and levels of the land, which rise from the east and to the west, with a large dip in and around the designated local wildlife site. The levels across the site are steep, offering opportunity for landscape enhancement. There are surrounding woodland trees, which are key tree groups, and specimen trees of good quality, which would be protected by the landscape buffering. And the local wildlife site boundary must be preserved, yet has potential for enhancement. The pedestrian footways and existing rights of way to the southern boundary and maintain wider links to the countryside and Sill Farm to the east. The vehicle access have limited options, with only Welwyn Road and link to Sill Farm being the only accessible boundaries. Sill Farm boundary should be respected, maintaining suitable distances from existing properties in Sill Farm. Views would be preserved to ensure the integrity of the woodland edge and to limit the exposing of the site from wider views, especially from the countryside. Next slide. The proposed development is outlined, as I said before, for up to 342 units, with access and scale to be considered only at this stage, with the appearance, landscape and layout as reserved matters. The site would deliver 20% affordable housing, equating to 69 units, with a 10-year split of 79% and 21% in favour of affordable rent. 10% of the units would be adaptable wheelchair occupants. There would be over 48,000 square metres of public realm and private amenity space, including 2,000 square metres of dedicated play space, with 693 car parking spaces and 35 for visitors, and 342 cycle spaces. Next slide, please. This slide shows in the left image the strategic site allocations in Hertford Town and the number of units, or the circa number of units, including Hart 3 master plan, as said before, called the Archers Spring, which forms part of the adopted local plan, which expresses the need to accommodate around 550 new homes in combination with the already consented scheme at Thieves Lane, which is for 254 units south east of the site, shown on the middle image, which is currently well under construction. Archer Spring site forms an integral part of the wider allocation, building upon the headline target of that minimum of 55, or around, I should say, 55 units, and building upon the master plan design concepts, show the scheme is closely aligned to these policy expectations. It is important to be aware that all allocated sites are high priority in terms of housing delivery and ensuring the council meets its 5-year housing land supply. This scheme would greatly contribute to ensuring this target is met. Next slide, please. This slide shows the design concepts of the site from a master planning viewpoint. And as you can see, the comprehensive landscape-led design approach, which tells a story as to how to deliver a high-quality housing scheme at the urban edge of Hertford Town, supported by positive design reviews. Next slide, please. This slide shows existing amenities and destinations close to the application site, which includes a community centre, doctors, primary and secondary schools, local shops and a post office, which are all in walking and cycling distance on Tudor Way. Next slide, please. This slide shows the indicative layout and scale of the scheme, which aligns to, as previously stated, the around 550 units, of which this is this parcel and the allocation here adheres to a high quality design principle that includes 4 distinct themes to ensure the site provides a beautiful place to live and visit. These are known as Valley Edge, Pansanger Gateway, Woodland Edge and West Farm. Next slide, please. This slide shows the indicative heights of the housing scheme, consisting of 2- and 3-storey dwelling houses and 3- and 4-storey flatted perimeter blocks. There's a key there, please, there that you can see. Next slide, please. This slide shows the parameter plans that are subject to consideration at this point relating to access and scale only, and which delineate specific areas for housing and access routes through the site with that indicative layout and heights details. Next slide, please. This slide sets out the indicative housing mix, which is supported by Council's housing team for overall and affordable housing, with a high percentage of units having gardens. The affordable typology consists of 60% as housing with gardens, and 50% of the 2-bed provision of affordable units would have gardens too, resulting in 77%, I should say, of all 2-bed affordable units having their own amenity garden. Next slide, please. This slide shows access and indicative parking provision. All family housing would have 2 off-street car parking spaces and parking courts for the flatted blocks, resulting in 91% of the maximum parking provision. In terms of cycle parking, there would be one per unit. As part of the highway works, a new junction along the north side of Welland Road would provide the main road connection to the development. Sustainable transport methods have been prioritised within the proposal by extending the existing bus route and rerouting it through the site, as well as reducing the walking distance to public transport for residents. Active travel is promoted with safe and attractive share access routes for pedestrians and cyclists with connection to Seal Farm and to the local wildlife site. The proposed scheme would not significantly increase traffic congestion in the surrounding areas, which is supported by the county's Highways Authority. Next slide, please. This slide shows the junctions at Perrick Gardens and along Welland Road. The extended bus route and emergency services would have exclusive access and egress from Perrick Gardens, which would be controlled by rising bollards. Along Welland Road, there would be a shared cycle footway encouraging that active travel. Next slide, please. This slide shows the areas of dedicated play space in the form of pocket parks and wider spaces, delivering that 48,000 square metres of space, which represents circa 7,000 square metres above the recommended quantum set by the county's open space formulas. This represents 38% of the site retained as public landscaped open space. Next slide, please. This slide shows the SUD techniques used, which consist primarily of attenuation, basins and ponds, infiltration techniques, permeable surfaces, filter drains and tank systems. The image on the right shows the site falling within flood zone 1, indicating a low risk of flooding with a 1 in 1,000 annual probability. These techniques and attenuation of surface water runoff rates secured by condition will ensure the future performance of all SUDs and drainage devices would not lead to an increased risk of flooding. Next slide, please. This slide shows an indicative plan for tree removal and retention. There are no tree preservation order trees, those are protected trees within the site, and all Category A trees would be retained, with only a proportion of lower value Category B and C trees removed and replanted. There is a high bund of vegetation on the western part of the site and along the southern boundary that would be removed, and an extensive tree planting schedule considered in more detail at the reserve matter stage for landscaping. Next slide, please. This slide shows the on-site net biodiversity net gain creation, increasing habitat and hedgerows units by 13.21% and 75.14% respectively. These are significant improvements in the existing biodiversity baseline in terms of metrics. Next slide, please. This slide shows the green corridor, named GC2 in the Sale neighbourhood plan area, and on the right, the master plan framework. Following the examination of the neighbourhood plan, the specific location of the green corridor was removed from that policy contained, namely HSHE4 of the neighbourhood plan, as it was found sound that a more centrally located green corridor that links with the existing local wildlife site would be more efficient. As such, the scheme has been indicative design in this manner. Next slide, please. This is a view with the wireframe of the indicative scheme from Perrick Gardens, which continues the housing development from Seal Farm Estate, noting layout, appearance and landscape are reserve matters. Next slide, please. This is another view, an indicative wireframe view of the scheme along Welland Road looking west. Next slide, please. This slide shows a sliding scale produced from an RICS, the RICS independent examiner, on the financial viability of the scheme with regard to the provision of affordable housing and tenure. The scheme would deliver, as said before, 20% affordable housing with a broadly compliant tenure split of 71-23 29% in favour of affordable rent, where the contributions balanced with viability is circa 2.7 million, as circled on the table. However, through negotiations with the applicant has agreed to go beyond viability constraints and contribute an additional 1.3 million, totaling 4 million towards a range of county and district infrastructure projects secured by Section 106 legal agreement. Next slide, please. This slide pictorially showcases the strategic public benefits and social value that would be secured and delivered. The delivery of 342 new homes, or up to, with 20% affordable housing, a broadly policy compliant 10-year split. There would be a pot of 4 million to contribute to infrastructure at that county and district levels, and improved connectivity and open space provision. Next slide, please. This slide summarises the heads of terms secured by the Section 106 legal agreement. As I said, the contributions are significant, and a pot of 4 million would contribute towards education, children's play, the extended bus service and active travel, parks and gardens, including the Pans Hangar, NHS for GP provision, village and community centres, sports hall, natural and semi-natural green space, the children's services, and then travel plan. This is not exhaustive, but these are ones that are sort of headlined. This raft of contributions provide a significant contribution to those infrastructure beyond the viability of the scheme. And this weighs significantly in the planning balance. Next slide, please. Officer's recommendation is to grant outline consent, subject conditions informatives and the completion of the Section 106 legal agreement. This slide concludes my presentation. Next slide, please, sorry. A bit hasty then. This slide concludes my presentation with a sketch of the eventual scheme on Welland Road. That concludes my presentation. Chair, we've had a couple of late items that we received relating to the Lead Local Flood Authority. They came in quite late, but we've got a formal letter that sets out 6 conditions relating to the drainage and flood risk. The main purpose of reconsulting, it's important to note, was to update the infiltration rates and a lot of the data that came out of that. In these conditions that are being recommended, they fall very neatly into what's already been drafted as part of the officer report, the committee report. So I just want to make the members aware, and yourself, that that there's nothing in there that would compromise the scheme, and certainly these conditions would be imposed as part of a resolution to grant.
And thank you, Scott. Can I just clarify on that? So those conditions relate to the drainage strategy.
That's
and
correct.
the flood risk prevention strategy. Thank you.
That's correct, Chair.
So thank you very much for your presentation, which very helpfully showed us through the evolution of this scheme over the years. And I think it'd be also appreciated that there are things that we're approving and there's a lot of information that we're not approving right now, but it does help us understand the whole picture. And thank you for your very comprehensive report for members. So I'd like to now go on to our speakers to make representations on this application. First of all, I'd like to call Adam Leaf, who is representing the Seal Residents Association. Hi. So when you're ready, press the button.
Good evening, everybody. I'm chair of the Seal Ward Neighbourhood Association. We evolved from a group of residents who worked on the neighbourhood plan, and just got a copy here. We now represent all of the residents in Seal through the Neighbourhood Association. We've had 3 public meetings on this application, and we submitted an assessment of its compliance against the neighbourhood plan. We want the development to be the best possible for residents, old and new, and for the environment in Seal. Thanks to the planning officers for addressing a lot of our concerns on things like contamination, drainage and SUDS. But now on to the outstanding issues, which are also in an email I sent to members yesterday. Affordable housing is essential for people to upsize as their families expand and for young people to get their first home. We know your hands are tied on the 20% with the viability, but it would be good to see how that's being compensated for in other developments so that our members can understand how to get houses. We want green developments, but the proposed central green corridor is unsuitable unless it provides functional wildlife habitat linking habitats together. So we need a 15-metre minimum wide strip of wild land, not sterile grassland or play park, which was proposed in the drawing we saw earlier. Otherwise, you know, if they can't do that, the corridor should revert to the GC2 location from the neighbourhood plan, and that should be explicit in the condition. The planned bus route through Perrott Gardens is recognised by Highways as suboptimal, but safe, due to the insufficient width for 2 buses to pass. Now, the analysis was done on the current service of 2 buses an hour in each direction. The proposal in the officer's report is that goes up to 4 buses an hour. So we feel the analysis should be revised with a final solution to be decided under reserved matters based on that revision. The Seal Farm Community Centre will have no access to drop off disabled elderly people or small children from the new development. They would have to go all the way around via Welling Road. Section 106 is provided, and we would like a condition to specifically ask the developer to sell or lease a small parcel of land so that we can provide an access to drop off from the new development. And also on accesses, we've commented on the access to Bentley Road, and we believe an access to the Ridgeway Play Park should be added. The proposed foot cycleway along Welling Road mustn't cause the removal of trees or existing hedges, and that should go into a condition. Also, there needs to be a solution for parking vehicles belonging to properties on Welling Road, including the 2 new ones being built. And that should go into the reserved matters.
Afraid we have to stop you now.
That's fine.
Thank you, Adam. So if we can go to Alex Mitchell, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alex Mitchell. I'm the Secretary of the Lee Valley Shooting Association, which is a shooting ground and gun range at Hanging Grove in Bramfield Road. We're celebrating our 55th year at this site. It's a well-established, well-run sports facility offering local people of all ages and abilities the opportunity to take part in the sports of clay pigeon and air gun shooting in a safe and controlled environment. The application site at Archer Spring is due south of the gun range at a distance of less than 1 kilometre. At the closest point, it's approximately 500 metres away. Although a noise assessment was carried out for the development, it was basically along the B1000. So although the gun range was in operation at the time, no significant effect was registered. We contacted the planning office, who raised the matter with Patricia Howes, the EHO, who visited the site and emailed George Shingler in July 2019 to say that the noise has the potential to affect use of their properties, for example, those facing the ground having to keep the windows shut or restricting use of their gardens. Ms. Howes went on to recommend that the developer should discuss this issue with the shooting ground, but to this date there has been no communication with them. It is odd that at paragraph 51 in the report it does say that no development shall take place until a scheme for protecting the proposed dwellings from noise from road traffic has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. How bizarre that the noise from a distant road is deemed more worrying than the sound of gunfire. Our concern is that a resident of the new dwellings might move into their new house, hear the gunfire, and might well ask themselves, what's that noise? And more importantly, why had nobody thought to bring to their attention that they're moving close to a shooting ground? We believe every prospective resident of the new development must be made fully aware of the situation before they commit themselves to purchase or rent a property in the new development in a Ministry of Sound type of arrangement. Existing businesses and facilities should not have unreasonable restrictions placed on them as a result of development permitted after they were established. The crux of the matter is that we've been here for 55 years, and we pointed out to the local authority and the developers that there will be a problem about noise. When the complaint comes, as it inevitably will, we will expect the Environmental Health Department to explain to the complainant that the issue was considered to be of insufficient importance to warrant any form of mitigation at the time of planning, and is therefore unreasonable to expect the shooting range to alter its operations subsequently. When it comes to court, as of course these things tend to do, the court will see that the council and the developer ignored the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I'd like to now call on Jeff Springer or Duncan Parr, whichever you wish. Welcome. So start whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Jeff Springer. I'm Development Director of London Regional Properties, and I've been working on this site since 2009, when the site had a planning permission for a David Lloyd tennis centre. Discussions started at that time for the reallocation of the site for that of housing, and through 2012, 2018, we had plenty of public consultations, meeting various people together with, at the time, meeting the inspectorate to get this site to be allocated for residential. This process took 6 years for the allocation to happen, and we submitted our planning application, funny enough, on the 11th of April 2019, which is to the date, 5 years later. We're seeking the outline planning application for approximately 342 homes of mixed uses, as discussed earlier, and we're seeking permission for the access and the scale of the development. We've been asked why it's an outline planning application, and the reason being is that it's taken this amount of time to get to where we are today. The sustainability, the ecology, the new building regulations, had we designed it as a detailed planning application, it would be out of date today. And therefore we felt it very important that the scheme coming forward as a detailed planning application into the future would take all these things into account. With regard to the latest public consultation, we have met with the Seal Farm people. We've heard what they've said, and we've made, as we said earlier, the scheme is an outline scheme, so their concerns can be taken into the future as part of the detailed design. The gentleman just now talked about the firing range. We actually did not know that he had actually written to Dual Shingle, and so there was a communication miss on that. But the existing Seal Farm is within 500 metres of the shooting range, and so the complaints haven't happened there, so I'm not quite sure why we would have more complaints on our site. 38% of our site is open space. The amenity for the proposed occupants is 20% above the approved policy. The reason why we're at a 20% affordable offer is that the ground conditions are such, being a tip for many years, that it's costing a huge amount of money to bring the site into a developable state, and that would take time and a huge amount of money, and that is why we went to an independent adjudicator to work out what was the correct amount of affordable housing and payment because of the extraordinary cost of the contamination on the site. We want to get on and start the construction of the site as soon as possible. We wish to deliver the new homes within the 5 years. And thank you very much indeed for allowing me to speak.
And now, can we hear from Duncan Parr? That's it? I'd now like to ask Councillor Clements, who is the District Councillor for Seal, to speak.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you, Chair. I will jump straight into that. A huge amount of time. The nature of where we are today means that a lot of what I'm going to talk about are kind of areas where I think we should be strengthening the application. But I want to be clear up front that on balance, I do support it. You know, it isn't perfect, but we do need more housing, and you know, this is an allocated site that provides that. I do also want to quickly thank Scott and Jill before him for all the work that you put in there. So onto the details of the application. It is disappointing that there isn't more affordable housing. I do struggle to see how it's not going to contribute to problems we already have with traffic, particularly on Windsor Drive and Bentley Road, where they get used as route runs already. And I do think it would have been good to include a number of commercial units in the application for something like a cafe or something like that. But really, there are three things I'd highlight to you all today to take a look at. The first is the issue of the green corridor. The SNAP policy HSHE4 is really clear on the need to provide green corridors in this development, and the reason for that is to be providing that permeability for wildlife. You know, it is really important that we have bridges between different habitats that otherwise would be too small to sustain animals, so that the animals can kind of move between them. And this is a development that's going to sit between some sort of really important woodland habitats. I do accept some of the logic around having that larger central space, but there's a big difference between having a genuine green corridor with, you know, hedgerows, proper sized gaps, roads that are designed to allow crossings, all of that kind of stuff, and something that is a green corridor just in name only. Some of the language in the application talks about, you know, a central green rather than a green corridor, and the indicative plans that we saw earlier, you know, some of them are showing it as a play park, some of them showing it as just wide open spaces, and both of that is going to be a barrier to wildlife. So yeah, there rightly are conditions in the report about things like Swift bricks being included in the development, but there's nothing in there about making sure that is genuinely a green corridor. So I would seriously ask you all to consider putting that as a condition in the report, to ensure, sorry, condition on the application to ensure that it's, you know, a genuine viable green corridor for wildlife. The second thing that I would highlight is the access in Perrott Gardens. I will echo some of what Adam was saying about the buses, and about actually it's quite a bursty nature of traffic there, because it's people coming to and from the community centre there. But even ignoring that, the report does talk about how its current proposal is suboptimal. We talk a lot about encouraging active travel, and this is a route that's only going to get more important for pedestrians, as it's linking the new development to the community centre, to the park beyond that. So I don't think it's somewhere where we should be talking about relaxing best practice, particularly when there's open space on the other side of the road opposite the houses there. So yeah, there's additional plans being suggested by condition 12, and I think the applicant and the highway authority should be taking a proper look again at that part of it. The last point I'll highlight is about some of the buses. It's good that we're increasing bus frequencies. We already have significant problems with buses being delayed and diverted because they can't get through the estate. The development and the increase in buses is only going to make that worse. So either some of the Section 106 money should go to improvements, so that we do have like a workable bus route there through the whole estate, or we should be looking again at bus routes that access via Welling Road there. I think I'm getting close to time, so I will sum up. Yeah, the application isn't perfect, but nothing is. We do need more housing, and so on that basis, on balance, I support it. But that's with the caveat that we should be making changes so that it works as well as it can for new and for the existing residents. Yeah, I ask you to consider the condition around the green corridor, and looking closely at the access on Perrott Gardens and the bus route, to ensure that we're not building problems for the future. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clements. Thanks for speaking to the committee. And so now it's open to members for questions and comments and suggestions. Councillor Stowe.
It's really something I want to clarified, really. Excuse me. The access, we talk about access, and I hope we're talking about accesses, the one in Welling Road and the one in Perrick Gardens. But also on these sort of outline applications, frequently, it's included the Spine Road. Can you clarify that as well, please?
So the Spine Road, you mean the road that runs through and then finds its way to Perrick
The
Gardens?
Spine Road is the main road that will be adopted for the bus route.
And before we go to officers, are there any other comments relating to the access proposals? Councillor Hill?
Yeah, I sort of agree that if we've only got a single road coming out onto Welland Road, has there been anything, this came up in the comments to address the speed limit, I think it changes from 40 to 30 there. But also the additional, because you're going to have the development on the other side, so that access road is onto that road as well, how they combine, and what the impact of the two outlets will be, because that's now 500 additional houses. You know, and at peak times, what impact that will have. That road's quite busy, you know, you're turning into a fast lane of traffic, you know, is there going to be traffic lights there or monitor it, speed restrictions, speed cameras?
Thank you. Thank you. And any other members on access? We have Matt Armstrong from Herts County Council Highways. I wonder if I could ask Matt to respond to those points, please.
Yeah, hello, just checking you can hear me this time around. I know there was problems before. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Hello, Matt.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? It seems like you can't.
It's a little bit erratic.
Okay, I think we had this problem before. On your live stream, it was fine before, but it seemed like in
So
your...
no, we're not hearing enough of you. You're broken up. So does that mean we have to make this arrangement? I need to ask members whether we should adjourn for 5 minutes while we sort out a laptop on here so that you can hear what Matt is saying. So could I have a proposal to adjourn for a few minutes? Councillor Watson, and can I have a second? Thanks, Councillor Hill. And then all those in favour of an adjournment? Thank you. So that's carried. So we'll come back when we have the laptop fixed up.
areas of discussion. Oh, sorry, let me just.
Just to interrupt you, members raised, we've got 2 points to deal with first. One is the status, the formal status of the roads, and in particular, the Spine Road, which will carry the bus route, and whether that will be adopted. And the second point was the capacity of the junction onto Welling Road.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so sounds like there's a number of things there. I'll try and run through them all. Please do interrupt me if if there's any comments or questions. But yeah, so the Spine Road internally will be adopted. So that will go through what's called a Section 38 legal agreement with us. So that follows if and when planning permission is granted. Yeah, the detailed design of that Spine Road will be considered through the Reserve Matters application, and then the real fine engineering detail is through that Section 38 legal agreement, which follows later on. So yeah, there'll be an expectation that that will be designed to our standards. We've just got some new technical design guide, place and movement design guide. So yeah, when the Reserve Matters covering internal layout comes, yeah, we'll be checking that against our new design guidance to make sure that that Spine Road is to adoptable standards and can accommodate bus service. In terms of capacity of the junction, yeah, that has been modelled. A number of other existing junctions across the network have been modelled. The actual junction onto Welling Road, the capacity modelling has shown effectively there will be very little queuing. So that there's what's called a ratio to flow capacity, which is a measure of how well a junction copes with traffic. 0.85 or 85% is this measure of when a junction starts to fall down and become a bit too busy. It's well below that. Yeah, the queue lengths are very low as well. So we're not concerned about the junction in terms of capacity and queuing. I think the speed limit was mentioned along Welling Road as well, and the potential for extending the 30 mile an hour into the existing 40 mile an hour zone. That was considered some time ago when the application first came in. The 30 mile an hour limit is being extended very slightly, associated with the current Thieves Lane development. But it's not extending beyond that to the Archers Spring access. So that will still remain 40. The reason for that is we have a speed management strategy that essentially the headline of that is every highway, every road should have the look and feel of its speed limit. So if a road doesn't look and feel like a 30 mile an hour road, then it shouldn't be a 30 mile an hour road. And simply putting up 30 mile an hour signs along an existing 40 mile an hour road has been shown time and time again to not work. There's very poor speed compliance. So for the speed limit to be extended to 30 miles an hour, there would have to be quite a significant change to Welling Road outside the access along Archers Spring in its look and feel of the environment. There'd have to be sort of lots of frontage activity, narrowing of the highway, much more kind of urbanized than it is, and or very significant kind of traffic calming. So it's essentially we have a speed management group which includes police representation from our safety team, and it would have to go through that any speed change, and it wouldn't be approved by the police and by the safety team because the look and feel of that section of Welling Road is 40 miles an hour. It's not 30. Okay. So the key is making sure that the access has sufficient visibility for a 40 mile an hour speed limit, and it does. So it's making sure it's safe in that context that drivers can pull out and see to the left and right.
Great.
Sufficiently.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, great. That's really helpful. The part of that adopted road will be Perrott Gardens, and you've heard well, you know from the report and you've heard from representations that there's scrutiny of that road. You've scrutinized it a lot yourself, but there's a condition that is asking for more design. Can you just tell us a bit more about how that will meet adoptable standards and how it will be, and most particularly, how it will cope with two-way bus movement and how it will be attractive and safe for pedestrians and cyclists?
Yeah, so the original design of the Perrott Gardens bus-only access presented to us, it essentially reflected the internal spine road design, so 6.2 metre wide carriageway and 2 metre wide footways on both sides. I think it was about 7-8 months ago or so, we were contacted by the applicant alongside East Herts to say that a new constraint has become apparent, whereby the Parkland, the community centre land is no longer available to enable that widening of Perrott Gardens to enable the carriageway widening. And so essentially, I don't know quite right to say whether our hands are tied, but essentially, we have to work with the existing highway land that is in place at the moment, the existing width. I don't know the reasons why that land is no longer available for widening, but yeah, that's essentially what we as highway authority have been told. So what we have to do is come up with a solution that suitably accommodates pedestrians, but also suitably accommodates the potential bus services along there. So there is a relaxation of footway standards. I think that has to be acknowledged. It's not ideal in that sense. So 2 metres is a good practice width. 1.25 metre width footway is the absolute minimum technical standard. We're above that. So in that sense, the absolute minimum technical standard is exceeded. But yeah, and the carriageway width slightly further west towards the development access itself, there's a turning head. There's a 5.5 metre wide carriageway width, which just about allows 2 buses to pass by one another. There's good intervisibility along the whole of Perrott Gardens. It's a long straight road. Our safety team have looked at the plan and broadly given the okay. So essentially, it's a balancing act where we have one very important sustainable travel mode, a bus, having to be balanced against the needs of another very important sustainable travel mode, pedestrians. And these two designs are kind of having to not compete as such, but try and fit in within a constraint that we've been told now exists. So
Matt,
there are. Yes. Yeah.
Well, members, actually, we have a detailed proposal for Perrott Gardens. We have to decide whether that's sufficient for planning. Obviously, we support this principle, and we note that there's condition 12 acknowledges that more work has to be done, and what Matt has said shows that the work continues on that to get the best possible. So really the thing for members is whether that is sufficient with that understanding of future highways work to go on.
So that's spot on. So sorry to come in, but yeah, there's a difference in the wording between condition 11, which talks about the Welwyn Road access, and the wording of condition 12, which talks about the Perrott Gardens access. It's quite subtle, but it's important. So the Welwyn Road access, we're basically saying, yes, that for planning purposes, that's acceptable. The next stage is the section 278 implementation side of things. For Perrott Gardens, what we're asking for is a step before that, where we want to see a revised highway design, part of the planning process, through this condition. We want to approve that, and then it can follow onto the detailed engineering section 278 stage. So there's an additional step been included in condition 12 for Perrott Gardens compared with condition 11 Welling Road, if that makes sense. So we just, it's a belt and braces approach really, where we're very broadly okay with what's been presented with Perrick Gardens, the design, but yeah, we want to see a bit more work done on that.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Could I ask you about condition 11, which is about, this is we have before us detailed drawings. We have the principle of access and circulation, but we also have the detailed drawings for work on Welling Road, which is putting a footway and cycleway along Welling Road. And that's conditioned, and there's a couple of things on that. One is that it doesn't appear to go to the end of Welling Road, so it doesn't quite complete the journey to the station. And the end of Welling Road is notorious because the pavements are narrow. So I wonder if you could just comment on that, why it doesn't go all the way to the station. And secondly, in terms of the footpath, there's reference to drop curbs, so to enable pedestrian movement. But are there some roads where there could be a raised carriageway in order to optimize pedestrian convenience?
Okay. So in terms of the route to Hertford North rail station, that was looked at very early on when the planning application was submitted. As County Council, as a highway authority, we have a team here who actually has a scheme already drawn up along Welling Road, that eastern section down the hill towards the station, to widen the footway along there and consider cyclist movements better. So very early on, it was decided that a Section 106 contribution would be better to seek from the Hart3 developments to go towards that scheme that essentially we as County Council are developing. That scheme hasn't moved on because it's essentially we've not got funding for it yet. But there's an amount of money from this development being proposed towards bus service and active travel scheme. So hopefully there'll be a bit of money from this development that we can earmark towards that scheme. It won't be enough to pay for it in its entirety, but it will be better to be pulled towards that. And I think it's remembering that both the Thieves Lane development and this Archer Spring development together are delivering a really quite significant section of new footway and cycleway along Welling Road as it is, and really improving some of the existing features along there, some of the existing footways, particularly outside the school and
Well,
yeah.
no, that's great. So thank you. Yeah, it improves access right along and it links up with Fleming Crescent and local services. In the list of items for the, there's a sum of money that the HCC have that they'll be distributing. Is it possible to put that eastern end of Welling Road explicitly into that list? And I suppose that's a question for maybe for others.
We could do. I think you have to be clear. I have to be clear with members in that so that we have what we have termed. I think it's a bus service and accessibility contribution. Sorry, a bus service and active travel contribution of nearly £460,000. Most of that will be taken up by providing a new or improved service. I think it might be in the region of £100,000 of that that can go towards other schemes such as Welling Road down to the station. But that Welling Road scheme we have also extends along North Road and will certainly cost a lot more than £100,000 to deliver. So I think it's just being clear that it'll be a very useful amount of money from this development potentially to be earmarked towards that. But we still need to secure other funding sources.
Okay.
But yeah, that
Yes.
scheme could specifically be mentioned in the 106 if members felt that was justified.
That'd be very helpful. So thank you. I mean, we can leave that with you and the planning officers here to we have the contributions list in the report, so that would be very helpful. With the bus stops, this is I think this may be for planning officers. There's a bus stop that is to be improved. And I can't remember what the condition is, but I wonder if it says what has to be done, but it needs to also say that the works shall be carried out. And just to make sure that that actually happens.
Yeah, so I think the wording of the condition in terms of off-site highway works, I provided some bullet points, which includes it's a provision of 2 new bus stops along Welling Road.
Yeah.
There's a crossing point between them. There's various other highway works. Yes. So
it's question. I think condition 17. Is that right?
Yeah.
15. Okay.
Yeah. 15. Yeah. So there'll be new central hatching along much of Welling Road outside the site, which will give a visual restriction of lane widths, which should help to slow speed slightly along Welling Road. Obviously, one of the key highway works is this new shared footway cycleway along a long extent of Welling Road. And yeah, all of that needs to be completed before first occupation is what the condition's saying.
Yeah, and the bus services, making sure the bus services operate, that is all part of that total sum. Is that right? So the bus service element will be covered through the Section 106 agreement. So that the money from the developer towards the enhanced bus service will all be covered through the 106 rather than through conditions. And that money, so we have bus service contributions from other developments across Hertford, including Thieves Lane opposite. And we have a passenger transport unit that is very proactive in using that money and spending it and identifying how existing services can be improved, how new services can be introduced. So I'm confident that not too soon after first occupation that there will be a good quality bus service routing through the spine road of the site. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Matt. Members. Councillor Adams.
Yes, it's obviously a question for Matt on this. Given that this is an outline planning proposal, is there any detailed planning proposal you could possibly conceive that would require your adjudication again relating to this junction? So if the numbers remain the same, number of houses, is there any condition upon which suddenly highways would have an issue?
When you say the junction, do you mean the main development junction onto Welling Road? Or?
Yes.
So this is an outline planning application, but seeks access details in full. So a reserved matters application in future won't look at or be able to look at the junction again. That time is now, is my understanding, but your planning officers should be able to confirm that. But yeah, if the description of the development changes, particularly if it goes upwards, then I think that's a different matter. But yeah, I'd have to defer to your planning officers on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Members.
We want to follow up on that. What would the condition be that would make that happen?
Yeah, just to address that. Well, Matthew said it. Yes, in terms of access, this is certainly the point at which you make a determination. What it's been set out in the conditions, and indeed the Section 278 agreement, wouldn't be changed. The only thing you can change from an outline to reserved matters is matters that relate to reserved matters after this. So certainly what's in the committee report and the conditions and the section 278 agreement is for consideration as of today. Changing that would not, in terms of the financial sums and otherwise, would not be something we could sort of renegotiate. So yeah, certainly the access is here for determination as of today.
So the access is part of a detailed approval. This is the detailed part of the application that would give permission for. If anything, if circumstances changed, there would have to be a new application or an amendment to that permission. Is that how it work?
Well, it depends on the change, and obviously we're here today to discuss what's on the table. And so, yeah, we if there is a different development on the table, then we'd be back here to have the same discussion.
Okay, so the main thing is we've heard your advice on that junction design and the modelling that you've done. Councillor Stowe?
My understanding is surely is that if we're here to decide on the two accesses, we must be happy with the application on those two accesses, because that's what we need to decide. And if we feel that the information is inadequate for us to decide, then we need to say so. That's what I feel.
Is there the conditions? There are some pretty belt and braces conditions. Are there things about those conditions that members would want to add to or change to ensure that we get that happiness on both accesses? Councillor Hill?
Just for clarification, so on the B1000, you've got the development on the north side, and on the south side, you've got, well, the other side of the road, you've got Panshanger Park, where people may wish to go to. Is there going to be any crossing points put in, pedestrian crossings, or to facilitate crossing, in winter and whatnot?
Can somebody answer that? Because there's access into Panshanger Park, of course, over the other side of the road.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just put a plan up, that might be useful. A second. Hi there, Councillor. If you can see on the top right, top left image, next to the junction that's being created, there's an access that is being created from the application site to Panshanger. There are a number of actually pedestrian refuges as well that are going in as well, just to help with the crossing. But there is a direct access on the top left into Panshanger there. So there will be a link.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any physical crossings, does there? So how you get out of the site and over to Panshanger, I don't know without taking your life in your hands, because it's 40 miles an hour at that point, I presume.
Shall I jump in there? To my understanding, I can't see the plans you're looking at, but there's a public right of way running through or alongside the Thieves Lane development opposite, and there's to be a new central pedestrian refuge island along Welling Road that lines up with that where that right of way from Thieves Lane opposite comes out onto Welling Road. So anyone from Archers Spring can use that to cross into the Thieves Lane development or alongside it, which I think then links into Panshanger Park. There's also a bridleway further west which comes out onto Welling Road, and the plans should show, I think on one side of the road there's an existing forced construction crossing, sort of a fenced equestrian area, and the idea is that that will all be that will be an equestrian crossing in effect, which should be to be used by other highway users. So there are crossings along Welling Road to be provided.
So I wonder if sorry, Matt, thank you. I wonder whether we could, in the light of this major new development and in the light of its proximity to a really important park opposite, could we add to the highways conditions something to the effect of finding a safe place to have a pedestrian crossing? You know, in the light of the ones that you've already mentioned, but something that serves an existing footpath, there's long distance footpath, but also the immediate needs of the residents.
I'll just be clear, Councillor Stop, that you're referring to a link to Pansanger Park, which I think is shown on the top left-hand side, where there's a proposed crossing on the top one. So there is the location of the crossing that I think you referred that my colleague referred to, and that is the connection to the bridleway, which is the safe location for that crossing, and that detail of that crossing. Yeah, that's it.
That's very helpful.
Is it worth pointing out the other ones if members can't see it on the screen very well? Because I appreciate it's.
And that one that you just pointed to, is that a controlled cross? Is it like a pelican or anything?
My understanding is that it isn't controlled, is it? But it is a safe crossing at that part. There's obviously the main access point is the new shared cycle pedestrian, which is required by the policy. The policy doesn't require the specific particular type of crossing of Welling Road, and so in terms of what the planning policy is the requirements that are set out, the application and the accesses have been designed to meet the requirements of the policy.
And so so it's a simple matter then of making sure that that's actually constructed, perhaps in the conditions. Thank you. Councillor Stowe?
I'm just looking at drawing 4 on the footpath, and it's got what it calls an informal, proposed informal crossing. What is an informal? Is that markings on the road, or if you could?
I think I'll probably defer to the highways officer to determine what an informal crossing is.
Did you hear that, Matt?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. No.
Yes, please.
On the drawings we've got in front of us, it shows on drawing A, which is, I believe, the one where it comes through from one of the existing roads and picks up on a road on the other side, on the Thieves Lane side. But a bit further along, there's a crossing point, proposed informal crossing to link up the public footpath across the road. And what is that?
So where it says 2 metre wide proposed informal crossing. Yeah, there's so hopefully you can see the development access coming out onto Welling Road. So if you go to the east of that, there's a crossing point with a central pedestrian refuge island, and where that crossing point is lines up with the public right of way on the opposite side of the road that routes through or alongside Thieves Lane. There's then another central refuge island crossing point a little further east of that, to get people safely across the road to the new bus stop. So you should be able to see a new bus stop with a short footway strip or waiting area on the opposite side of the road. So that one a little further to the east is purely to get pedestrians over the road to the new bus stop, the westbound bus stop. And then,
can I just interrupt you? Sorry, it's just the fact that you're giving us a nice lot of detail. That's good. But what I asked you was, how do you describe an informal crossing point? What is it? Is it nothing? Is it an island in the middle of the road, or what?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of semantics and terminology within the highways world that, you know, it would be described as different things by different highway officers. I mean, you know, a signalised pedestrian crossing would be described as a formal crossing. If there was no central refuge island, it was just, you know, pedestrian drop curbs either side, then that tends to be described as an informal crossing. When there's a central refuge island of 2 meters width or depth, which is the good practice standard. So, you know, somebody who's just got off their bike, wheels across to the centre, they're waiting in that central refuge island for vehicles to pass by. That depth makes sure, you know, that their wheels of their bikes don't have to sort of encroach onto the running lane of the carriageway. So it's an informal crossing in the sense that pedestrians are having to give way to cars along the main road, but you know, it's a recognised, generally safe provision for pedestrians, and yeah, it makes it a more pleasant environment. Obviously, you're not having to cross the entire carriageway in one go. You know, trying to cope with traffic in 2 directions. And yeah, it just provides that kind of refuge safe area.
Lovely. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. That's very helpful. So perhaps we can just make sure that the conditions just add that these works to crossings will be carried out. That will just ensure that they're there.
Just wondered, will there be any additional lighting put in if these are busier crossing points, just to make them visible in winter?
Matt, would there be lighting in association with those crossing points?
Yeah, so lighting will be considered. So if approval is given, so there's a section 278 agreement that then the developer has to go through. We have a team dedicated to working on that, which is the real fine engineering detail, all the technical side of things, which includes lighting. There will be a lighting assessment. We have a specialist lighting team here. So that's a long way of saying yes. The area, the crossings will be suitably lit.
Great, thanks, Matt. I think that's really great. So, members, some new topics or same? Councillor Stowe.
New one for you. We've done highways to death, I think. What it is it's come up on other sites. Whether you've got these attenuation ponds to collect the rainwater, they are open, and there were quite a lot of worries about them not being fenced because of young people. And some of them, I believe, are quite near the play areas, and I think we need some sort of fence. And it came up in the last application we did, and I think a condition to cover that would be useful.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. The drainage of this site is really important, and in some ways it's a surprise to me that there's not a parameter plan for the drainage strategy, given that we have so much information in the documentation. It does seem, I wonder whether officers could comment on whether a condition could effectively make that a reserve matter all of its own, so that we formally get the drainage strategy, because it involves the attenuation ponds that Councillor Stowe has mentioned, and implications for the topography and the natural area.
Well, Councillor, yes, just consistent with the previous committee, I believe this was discussed. It's something we can impose a condition to safeguard. Indeed, with a sort of boundary treatment, fencing around the basements. Obviously, this being outlined for access and scale, it would be part of the reserve matters detail. But certainly, we can be consistent in how we've been previously. And with regards to the basements, the attenuation basements, we can look to have a sort of fencing as befits the design as well, because as I say, that's it's still indicative, so we need to be mindful of that, but certainly we can carry that forward.
and to have a condition that asks for the drainage strategy as a reserve matter effectively. So the strategy for the entire site.
That's correct.
Just to clarify, there is a condition 23 requires a surface water drainage scheme as part of the condition, and so that condition will probably take place once the detailed design has been sort of carried out, and so you can't do a detailed surface water drainage scheme until you have a layout that's been sort of designed in at that stage, and so we're at an outline stage at the moment, and so that information isn't yet known. So that follows, as you would expect for a standard outline application in this instance. So the reserve matters will likely include further details of the drainage basins. They will have the landscape treatment around them. They will discuss what sort of capacity they can take, but the surface water drainage scheme condition is the condition that will actually include the detailed measures that are required. And so you've got the control at that sort of reserve matter stage and condition stages. So we've got those double checks in place already.
So in the submitted documents, in the list of documents that are being approved by this permission, is the drainage strategy. Is that document approved? If committee approves the scheme, does that document get approved? And is the drawing in there of the drainage strategy, is that approved?
No, the drainage strategy is an outline strategy. So it identifies one possible way of successfully draining the site. And so the current proposals that are on the table as part of the as part of an application with the parameter plans, they identify areas of non-developed area, and it's in those areas where your drainage basins are going to go, your infiltration ponds, that's where they're going to go. And so there is the detail that is known at that stage in terms of the capability of being able to deal with drainage, but the detailed design comes at the reserve matter stage.
Okay, so I understand that. I mean, it's an outline, but this is an outline planning application, and it's a really important parameter. So it's just we getting to understand where we are and what we're approving. That it also links with landscape, because within the parameter plans we see a drawing that shows a large green area, but in other documentation we see there's an illustrative landscape strategy. There's a detailed drawing that shows trees to be removed and trees to be retained. Again, is that and there doesn't seem to be a condition that says let's have the big picture on landscape.
Sorry, Chair, what was I was putting that slide up for.
So in that green area there,
yes, indeed,
that the topography is all over the place.
Yes,
and it's got woodland, it's got existing woodland and grassland.
Correct.
and ecology and pathways and so on. And that is the outstanding constraint on the site. The master plan is landscape led. In some ways it's surprising that we don't have a landscape parameter plan. And so I'm not sure that we have conditions about landscaping, about landscape design, but could we have a condition that asks for that overall landscape strategy, so that we're clear about what woodlands being retained and what trees are being added and what buffers are being kept?
Yeah, sure. I mean, referring to that parameter plan there, the site actually, the green area is a local wildlife site, so it actually falls beyond the parameters, as it were. In fact, that's actually sort of where the green belt starts and finishes. So it would have to be within the confines of the red line in terms of how conditions are imposed. To go beyond that, that's where you have some legal agreements for Section 278, for instance. So with the conditions that we do have currently with the Landscape Environment Management Plan, the various suite of conditions we've got in liaison with our council landscape officer, we do feel is sufficient at this juncture, and they'll be carried forward as part of the reserve matters considerations, of which landscaping is obviously crucially one. So that would obviously be something that would be duly considered as part of that reserve matters application. But the actual green space itself, that falls outside the red line, but there would be appropriate connections as part of the green corridor placement, which is, as I say, layout is not considered. So we need to be mindful that that the layout is still yet for determination. But yeah.
Yes, I want to be clear. There's a distinction between landscape, the landscape, and landscaping. And the conditions are about landscaping and landscape design. That's all for reserve matters. That's all for later. But at the moment, we do not have a parameter plan that says how landscape is shaping this development. We don't have those broad landscape principles about topography, woodland, and habitats and so on. And that seems to be missing. And can there be a condition that asks for that strategy?
It isn't a matter for consideration. So it's only the access and the scale of development that we're here to consider. And so there's no requirement to get that detail at this stage, but through the conditions that are set out in the report with the landscaping conditions, the management plan conditions, the SUDS management plan conditions, the hard and soft landscaping, and through the detailed reserve matter submissions, the committee and the authority will have the detail at that stage. And so it isn't a requirement at this stage, this outline stage, because only matters of access and scale are for consideration.
I see that, but the parameter plans that we are approving show where all the development is going to take place. All of the development is a reserve matter. So I'm just trying to understand how we make sure we are approving the principles that will shape this development, because the conditions go detailed. They go down to specific areas and choosing the plants and things like that. But we have a large natural area, and it's going to have new attenuation basins in there. There's going to be a pumping station in the green area. And so in terms of wastewater management, there's going to be a pumping station, there's going to be manhole covers. These are things that need to be understood together before detailed design carries on, because they're constraints.
Chair, just as correction, I did say that the red line didn't include that green, that is an error. It certainly does, but I think just to sort of double down what we've said, the access and scale is certainly up for consideration. We can't impress the applicant to provide that data because they haven't expressed on the application form in terms of the level of detail. And the conditions do go into detail because how outline is sort of framed, the conditions are almost exhaustive, an outline that carries forward into the reserve matters application. So that's why you'll find the conditions are quite perceivably detailed, and they have to be in order to capture the future eventualities of the reserve matters application, which will include, as I said before, the landscaping.
In your report, which is very comprehensive and covers everything, there's a long section about landscape, and so this is paragraphs 10.47 through to 10.57, and my sense was that everything written down there needs to be found in conditions. They are all things that the developer has to take account of going forward.
I just want to say one thing. Because of the application material that's included, there is more information that is submitted for consideration as part of the application. And when I say consideration, it's all meant to give confidence and assurances that when the detail is prepared at the reserve matters or the condition stages, that a form of development of the scale and type that's proposed can be accommodated. And so a lot of information is offered for consideration in technical reports, as you would expect in a lot of outline applications. And so the report goes into a reasonable amount of detail in describing the principles that will inform the reserve matters that follow on from this stages. And so, and the reason why we've had to go to that length to try and explain that in the report is that if we didn't have that information, then there might be 100 more conditions. And so the fact that the applicant has gone to great lengths to establish certain principles through character areas, certain forms of development, certain landscape strategies, certain drainage strategies. The fact that they've gone to those lengths gives the assurances that the form of development can be accommodated. But I want to be clear, we're not approving those details. They're meant to sort of inform how a scheme could come forward in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Stowe?
Yes, my understanding is that we're being asked to agree the accesses and the scale of the development. That drawing up there on the wall shows it quite well, so I'm quite happy to propose we accept the officer's recommendation and approve this outlined consent.
Councillor Dunlop?
Can I just confirm the 106 payments that are detailed in the report, are those fixed at this point, or will those be agreed at reserved matters point?
Officers?
No, they are fixed. They're based on a sort of quite a
On the calculator?
yeah, the calculator, exactly. It's kind of a sort of set in stone, should we say? And it's sort of so yeah, those overall figures are fixed. In terms of where they're spent, that's different. But
Okay.
in terms of the actual sum of money,
So
that
where
is-
where they're spent, would that be at come at reserved matters, or would that
well,
would we
it'd be
get a
something
chance
that-
to determine on that at all?
I don't know if Jackie wants to. We've defer this question to Jackie, who's our district officer.
The actual amount of contributions come from the local plan, the SPD,
Yeah.
and all fills in. The amounts have been agreed. The final wording will be part of the legal agreement. So, you know, we are flexible with our wording and we try to include as many potential uses as possible.
Let me ask a question, which I understand we're not answering tonight, but I noticed that there are 2 allotment sites off-site which are getting contributions from the 106. My question really is, why is the allotment not within this area here, where you've got a chance to build a bit more of a community rather than extending into other places? I understand that part of the answer would be it's probably slightly cheaper to use an existing site if there is space available, and I don't know whether the space is there. But if we're allocating monies towards an off-site location for the allotments, and that's fixed at this stage by 106, and we're determining that tonight, then I would like to have explored that to come back into within the site.
I can't actually answer about where the allotment's going to be, so I'd have to refer it across.
Yeah, in terms of the provision for allotments, there's not an actual policy requirement for allotments per se, but we do have a contribution
Yeah,
that's in the heads of terms you may have seen.
60,000 or something.
Yeah,
like that,
for that provision.
yeah.
There's nothing that sort of implicates a sort of have to have allotment provision, and clearly through the applicant submission, it's felt that, you know, without that policy basis, it's a wholly residential scheme that's coming forward to deliver the housing, and that's the sort of, in terms of public benefits, is where this application sits at this time as an outline application. But we do have that provision for allotments, and that will be secured, subject to a resolution to approve here.
But are you fixed in where that money will be spent actually physically, you know, location wise? Because it does mention 2 sites at the moment.
Defer that to Jackie.
Basically, an allotment contribution can only be spent on allotments or community growing spaces.
Sure.
We have identified the 2 nearest local allotments
Yeah.
as that, but we do have a provision in the wording that says and or other community growing spaces as used by the residents of the development. So if something comes forward as an allotment stroke community growing space, they then have the provision to go through the application process to apply for funding.
And it could then sit within this development here,
It could do,
if the residents so chose.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wonder if officers could just pick up some of the points we heard from speakers. One is the point about a wildlife permeability strip, 15-metre wild strip. Secondly, access to Richmond's Park, and then hedgerows, and the noise from the shooting club.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, there's the report sets out the approach that the officers have taken to consider the requirements of the Seal Neighbourhood Plan, and in terms of the policy HSHE4, it requires green corridors and networks, and the policy goes into some detail about the Hart3 development site in particular, and so it clearly is a very important part of the development scheme itself, and has been considered through the discussions with the applicant to date. And so the policy is quite clear that the location of the green corridor can be determined through the detailed application, so through the conditions, through the layout, and through the reserve matters. And so in terms of getting that detail, we can secure that at that stage. What I think we can explore the possibility of is setting a new condition that does begin to specifically reference elements of that HSHE4 policy. And so we would propose a condition potentially that would require the details of the green corridor as required by the neighbourhood plan to be included within the relevant reserve matters application. So we can specify that detail has to be provided. We can elaborate further in terms of identifying what the details should include. And obviously a green corridor, as specified by the policy, requires permeability for wildlife and people, and the linkage to both is important, and that was referenced in the examination of the neighbourhood plan, which has already been referred to. And so we can make sure that requirement to deliver the green corridor sits within a relevant reserve matters application that includes the relevant details. So it can include details of landscape treatment, include details of biodiversity provisions, ecological management and maintenance, and how that can be enshrined within a reserve matters submission. What we can't do is dictate that it's 15 metres wide. That isn't a requirement of the neighbourhood plan. We can't dictate that it has to go on the back of the properties. The examiner was quite clear that the efficacy of a corridor at that location was not suitable, and that a central corridor or central corridors was more appropriate. And so with that in mind, we think the condition can specify that the requirements of that policy are met, but what it can't do is stipulate it's 15 metres wide and it's located in that location. The first point I mentioned was that the layout and the location of that corridor can be determined through the reserve matters and through the detail in the conditions. So I think that is an important factor that I'd like to draw members' attention, and I think we can reference that policy as the specific reason for having that condition on this outline application. I think my colleague Scott will answer the queries into the shooting point.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, with the I mean, in terms of my report at the paragraph 10.135, if anyone's got it up, I do obviously make reference to the impacts on the shooting club being circa sort of 500 metres due north. Obviously, in consultation with our environmental health officer, there was found to be not a reasonable case to have a holding objection. We do have conditions, not least on noise impact assessments, and that will certainly will be done through the reserve mass applications on the discharge of conditions. I just think in terms of what is reasonable in terms of the 6 tested conditions as well, and having a very sort of a very bespoke condition on that, it needs to be reasonable and has to sort of be fit for purpose. And I think given the sort of distance, it was viewed by our environmental health noise officer that there would not be a holding objection, there would not be a demonstrable impact beyond what is existing situations, particularly if you do look at the map, you know, the properties along the Ridgeway are sort of equidistant to the shooting club. And I think, you know, giving existing relationships, I don't think we feel that we could impose a further condition or non-standard condition that would essentially, you know, mitigate beyond the existing conditions that we've already imposed.
Thank you. Councillor Connolly.
Is the number of cycle parking spaces fixed today? Because we're assuming there's more than one occupant per unit, because there's 2 parking spaces for most, but only 1 cycle parking. It's fine for bigger houses who can get sheds, but the flats and smaller properties, they're going to need more space for more than 1 bike.
They're not fixed. It's indicative in terms of because it's sort of conducive to, well, the description's up to 342 units, that's subject to layout and obviously the appearance. So they're not fixed, but we have, you know, in terms of our standards, we wouldn't let that slip, particularly with a view to promoting active travel. That's certainly you know, top priority, working with the highways authorities and in policy, sort of national and regional and locally. So we wouldn't compromise on that. So we'd sort of make it, you know, sort of perfectly clear that we wouldn't compromise on that at all. But it's not fixed as it stands at the moment.
Just to follow up, will it be possible to add to the conditions the requirement for some sort of coding, design coding, which would cover things like bike storage, bin storage, even public bike parking in public areas, that sort of thing?
The detail of a cycle provision will be required when the layout of the development has been prepared, so we know what number of units are coming forward at any given time, and then the location of those cycle spaces, the racks, if there are any public spaces as well, and like that will come forward at that time. In terms of setting design standards for that, the only guidance we have to go on at the moment is what's set out in the local plan supplementary guidance. The Seal Neighbourhood Plan references the Essex Design Guide in terms of other design elements. So we have introduced a condition that ensures that the reserve matters are compliant or can consider, you know, the good design practice in terms of the detail coming forward. But at this outline stage, there isn't a further control that we consider necessary or appropriate at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased that Neil said that he's going to put a condition about the green corridor, and that's actually allayed some of my fears. The only thing is, I believe that the 4-storey blocks are right adjacent to that green corridor. So you can have a lovely green corridor with 4-storey properties either side, and it kind of, will it not create like almost like a, you know, a very tall, I don't know, it won't be a very nice space, I don't think, because those tall buildings both sides. Can you just comment on that, please?
Can I add to that? Because we're not dealing with the detailed layout, so this is not for determination now, but we can't help seeing it, and we can't help seeing those blocks. So not only are they 3 and 4 stories, they're also very wide. They're you know, much wider than houses. But in addition, there's a very large area of parking behind them. So these are things that we would want picked up in the reserve matters and not necessarily shown like that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, you've obviously alerted to the obvious situation that this is only access and scale. Scale is important, but height isn't, well, not for review at this moment in time. Again, the word indicative is being used a lot, I know, today. In terms of looking at the heights and bulk and appearance, that is one of the reserve matters. So we'd certainly work with our design team very closely to ensure that we felt that the scheme was, you know, high quality, high design. But at this juncture, the heights are indicative. So whilst you have those concerns, and we certainly take those away, at this juncture, that would form part of the reserve matters considerations. Just to note that we have been through, in terms of the master plan design review panels, indeed the scheme has as well. So that's helped to inform a lot of what's come before us today. But in terms of the actual level of detail, again, access and scale is kept quite, you know, we sort of only deal with these 2 matters. So they will be for further considerations down the line at the reserve matter application.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it actually is a good question and a completely sensible question where you have a taller building next to a, you know, an area of grassland. I think the proportions in the parameter plans indicate that the space between development blocks will be quite considerable, and so that allows, you know, more than a 15-metre space between the facing buildings in order to ensure that green corridor. So we've got enough information to give us comfort at this stage that the principle of a route that could exist in that area would take place. But, you know, clearly we have to have regard for the height at that stage when we come to designate the corridor. Otherwise, you might have it might be compromised by a taller building, which could block light to an area that might have an impact on wildlife that's there. And so that is a consideration that would follow consideration at the next stage.
One of the parameter plans is heights, and it says categorically 2, 3 stories, 4 story. And that parameter plan, we are here, that's in front of us for approval. I wonder if those heights could be expressed as up to 3, up to 4, because that allows for that means we know. And the second thing is, can they be expressed in meters rather than stories? Because we don't have a proper that you know, there's a pitched roof as well on most of these.
The indicative heights are indicative, and so it probably doesn't need the reference to an up to reference in there. I mean, it's an interesting suggestion, I think, and I get we understand why you would raise it, but the way that the plans are set out as indicative, it provides that flexibility to go up to those amounts in terms of stories. In terms of the actual meter, you know, how you record the actual height, that could be done through an above ordnance datum level. I think that's where you're getting at this point, and so that is something that we can explore with the applicant should they decide to detail a parameter plan or the existing parameter plan that we've got, and that might reference AOD heights that can do the same job as an indicative height plan can.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I find it very confusing to know what we are approving as actual approved plans and what is indicative. And the heights is one of 3 parameter plans that we are approving. So I think if we can be clear that it's up to that just means it's not taken literally. Looking at the parameter plans, we're constantly having to take away the illustrative layout because we're not approving that layout, but it keeps appearing even in the parameter plans, and so that's just a worry. Can I also confirm that in the reserve matters, although there's no reference to non-residential, that's not precluded, that in a reserve matters application there might be ground floor accommodation that is non-residential that might serve community needs or be a shop. Can that be kept open?
I think the difficulty is what's outlined in the master plan Heart 3. It's not a policy requirement to have a non-residential land use. So I think that would be the answer.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Sorry, yes. It's probably already clear and obvious for most, but it is a condition that 69 properties will be affordable. Is that a condition?
It's enshrined in the Section 106 legal agreement as a clause, as part of a schedule. So it would be a very binding legal document that would actually secure that level of affordable housing.
But it's not a planning condition. It's just a 106 condition.
Yeah, it's actually beyond. It's more than a planning condition. It's a legal agreement, which is a far more sort of robust. It lies with the land as well, so it's something that's very much binding.
Thank you.
In Heart 3 policy, there's reference to a contribution for Panshanger Park. Can you sort of confirm that the way that has been incorporated into Panshanger Park and green spaces is that because the amount of money that is available for Section 106 is reduced? Is there a way you can justify that?
In terms of the Panshanger contribution, we do have that in terms of the heads of terms, and it's also as part of the update report that we did, just to highlight the fact that would be including the Panshanger in terms of part contribution. In terms of the sort of offset of other things, it's a very sort of it's formulaic in terms of the total. As I said before, it can't be changed, but we're certainly, as part of the contribution with working with our Section 106 district officer, Jackie, then that could be something we could sort of explore sort of later. But at this moment, it's secure that level of contribution. That's essentially where we're at the moment.
And one other clarification, which is there's a limited scope for extraction, but I'm not sure if there's a condition that relates to getting approval of works for opportunistic extraction.
So in terms of the mineral extraction you're referring to, in my report, there is some evidence in terms of potential minerals to be extracted, but because of the proximity and working with our minerals and waste at county level, there was no, we felt in terms of the advice given to us as officers, there wouldn't be a sort of viability case for extraction in that regard. So I think it sort of falls away at the fact that there wouldn't be any extraction following the sort of construction of the site. So that's been debated in my report, but in terms of viability and the proximity to Seal Farm, it was deemed as not a viable proposition.
I understand that. There was a little bit of scope for taking some mineral out that could be used in construction, so sand and gravel. So this is a sustainability point, really. Is there scope for that to contribute to the construction?
So I'm just trying to find the condition that will potentially.
I mean, it's probably worth just drawing members' attention to the requirements of the Heart3 policy, which has a subcategory which talks about demonstration of the extent of minerals that are present and the likelihood that prior extraction in an environmentally acceptable way have been considered. The policy says that as a minimum, an assessment of the depth and quality of the mineral together and with an appraisal of the consequential viability for prior extraction without prejudicing the delivery of housing shall be provided. So in terms of the requirements of that policy, it has met the requirement of that policy to date. In terms of the question about whether other extractions can be used in the constructive development, that is possible, of course, but I think the requirements of the policy have been met from an environmental perspective and in terms of the site allocation.
Thank you very much. Are there any other points, members? Councillor Hill?
Sorry, I've just got one, and it's going back to the cycle routes in S106, because it was the money allocated for cycle routes is very conditional on other funding being supplied. What would happen to the S106 money if that funding wasn't delivered?
Cycle funding is a county council contribution. So therefore it's down to the county council to allocate it as such. And I do know that they actually have an officer delivery group that pulls together all the contributions to actually spend them on projects. Generally speaking, there is normally 10 years from receipt to actually allocate and spend a contribution to allow for time for projects to actually come on board. If perchance a project cannot come on board and we cannot actually use the contribution, then there is the potential to actually have to return it to the developer. That's a highly unlikely scenario because we actually work very closely with colleagues across the councils and within the local area to ensure that what goes into the actual Section 106 agreement within the individual contribution wording gives us enough scope to have projects that can be actually fulfilled and that actually comply with Regulation 122. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Let's move to a decision. The recommendation before us is that planning permission, this is outline planning permission, be granted, subject to a Section 106 legal agreement and subject to the conditions set out in the report, with some small additions to add to the conditions that the pedestrian crossings will be constructed. To add to the bus stops conditions, which is 15 or 17, that works are to be carried out and completed. And then a condition requiring the detail of the green corridor. And then for officers to find a way of referring to heights above ordnance datum, and some clarification about the allocation of Section 106 funds to specific things. So with that, can I have well, I've had a proposal before, which is Councillor Stowe. May I have a seconder? Councillor Hill? And those in favour? Thank you. That's approved. Thank you. So, members, that was quite a long slog. Shall we take a break? I don't know whether we have to formally adjourn. I propose that we formally adjourn for 10 minutes. Could I see those in a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Hill, and then those in favour and those against and those abstaining. So that's carried, and so we'll have a 10-minute break. Thank you. So thank you, members, for coming back. I've lost my agenda. So the next application that we have before us is 3230681 Full. And this is land at Thorley House, Thorley Street in Bishop Stortford. And the proposal is change of use of the land and the erection of 9 dwellings with associated landscaping, vehicle access and parking. So I'd like to ask David to present this, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members. First slide we have there gives the wider context of the site to the south of Bishop Stortford. It's located at the junction of Thorley Street and Whittington Way. Next slide, please. Chairman, the wider context for the site was the first slide. This is a more detailed context. And as can be seen from that slide, we've got established housing to the northeast of the site, and to the south are the existing detached dwellings, Sparrow's Nest and Thorley House. And Chairman, to the west, we have the recently constructed Northwold Close, which forms part of the St James's Park development, which members will be aware is allocated under BISH 5 in the adopted local plan. Next slide, please. Chairman, and that plan shows the context of the site with St James's Park, and members will be aware that St James's Park is a residential-led housing development with primary, high schools, employment area and a local centre, and also a care home. Next slide, please. Chairman, that's the layout plan for the development. The proposal includes the erection of 3 3-bedroom, 2 4-bedroom and 4 5-bedroom properties. And members will note the site contains many trees, some of which will need to be removed to allow the development, but the most important trees are being retained, and a number of trees which are being removed are actually dead and need removal in any event. Chairman, again, to the south, you can see Thorley House and Sparrow's Nest, the Grade 2 listed buildings. There is an attenuation basin, which is proposed for this development in the southeast corner. And there is also a woodland area to the east of the site, fronting onto Thorley Street, which will be retained for biodiversity enhancement. And Chairman, just on the subject of biodiversity, this proposal includes bat and bird boxes and bee bricks for all of the properties. There's also 3 bat boxes and 7 bird boxes proposed for existing trees, and also 15 hedgehog highways for the development as well. And taken together with the new tree planting proposed, there will be a biodiversity net gain for the site as required by policy. Next slide, please. We've got some street scenes there of the development taken from various sides. Next slide, please. Some further street scenes just to give a good indication of the development. Next slide, thank you. Chairman, this slide shows the relationship of plot 4 in the development with Thorley House, the Grade 2 listed building. And as members will note, it is going to be a subservient building to Thorley House in terms of height and scale. And that slide is useful in also showing some of the existing boundary treatment which exists, and also the distance that plot 4 will be from Thorley House. Next slide, please. Chairman, we've got one of the elevation and floor plans for the development there. Next slide, please. And again, that's one of the other properties proposed. Next slide, please. Chairman, this slide shows some of the materials indicated for the development, and they are red brick, plain tiles, and a mixture of render of chalk, yellow and pink. But Chairman, I just need to advise that materials are conditioned, so there will be detailed consideration of those materials at a later date. Next slide, please. Chairman, that's the tree removals plan, which indicates the trees being retained and the trees being removed. Most of the trees on the boundaries are being retained, and some of the interior trees are being removed. Next slide, please. Chairman, this slide shows all of the climate change elements that the scheme includes. Every property will have solar panels, they'll have electric vehicle charging, air source heat pumps, and also water butts to collect rainwater for garden use. Next slide, please. Chairman, we're now into the photographs of the site, and this is a view looking east along Whittington Way down towards Thorley Street, and the site there is on the right hand side. Next slide, please. Chairman, that's a more detailed view of the area where the new access is going to be provided, and that's just to the left hand side of the road sign, or the back of the road sign, which you can see there. Next slide, please. And this is a view looking the opposite way along Whittington Way to the west. The site is right in front of you there, and members will note it does benefit from a lot of screening. This view was taken, I think, in May time, but the site generally is quite well screened. And members will also note that the site is elevated from Whittington Way as well. Next slide, please. Chairman, that's another view from Whittington Way. That shows the existing access into the land, which will be closed as part of this proposal. Next slide, please. And another view from Thorley Street, London Road, looking back towards the corner site there. And again, members will see the trees there, which do screen much of the development, or would screen much of the development. And Chairman, this is another view from Thorley Street looking towards the site, and that will be in a westerly direction. Next slide, please. Chairman, this slide does show the woodland area on the left there, which will be retained and enhanced as part of the scheme. Next slide, please. And that's a view from the interior of the site looking westwards towards Northwold Close in the background. Next slide, please. And finally, Chairman, this is a view from the rear of Thorley House looking northwards towards the site. The agent has superimposed plot 4 there on that photograph. You can just see it to the left of Thorley House behind the tree. Chairman, the report sets it out, but the council's conservation officer feels that the proposal would give rise to less than substantial harm in terms of the architectural significance of Thorley House and also its setting. Chairman, your officers have considered those comments, and as required by the NPPF, weighed the harm against the public benefits of the proposal. And Chairman, in view of the boundary screening that does exist, and also the mature cedar tree, which you can see in that photograph on the left-hand side, your officers feel that the public benefits of this scheme does outweigh the less than substantial harm, and the level of harm that does exist, in your officer's view, is not significant in the context of this scheme. Chairman, I just wanted to say briefly a little bit about affordable housing. It's set out in detail in the report in front of members. The policy HOU3 confirms that the development should provide 35% affordable housing, which would be 3 units in this case. The developer has contacted a number of registered providers who and could find no interest in this particular development, given the small number of affordable units being offered. And the council's policies do look, and in fact national policy also looks for affordable housing to be provided on site. In this particular case, your officers view that an off-site contribution is justified, given the difficulties in finding registered providers for only 3 units. The SBD, the council's SBD, in terms of off-site provision, does require a higher proportion of equivalent financial contribution, which for this scheme would be 5 dwellings. But in this application, the applicant submitted a viability assessment, which is allowed for in policy HOU 3 and in national guidance. And the viability assessment has been subject to independent scrutiny. And whilst the council's viability advisor did have a difference of approach in terms of build costs, it's very clear that the viability of this small scheme is marginal. And with all of that in mind, your officers have negotiated a contribution of £100,000 towards affordable housing, which sits halfway between the council's consultant's cost position and that of the applicant. And in view of all the factors, viability factors in this particular case, this is considered to be a reasonable outcome for this application. And Chairman, as set out in the report, this financial contribution would be secured by legal agreement and would be put towards affordable housing in the East Herts district. Chairman, I just wanted to briefly draw members' attention to the additional representation sheets. There are comments there from the ecologist at the County Council regarding the preliminary bat roost assessment, and Chairman, the recommendation to you that condition 12 is amended to include the mitigation measures which are outlined in the bat roost assessment, that they are incorporated into condition 12. Chairman, there's also some late representations from the occupier of 2 North Wold Close, which are listed there. And also, finally, the agent provided some details of the attenuation, or further details of the attenuation basin, and there are some details there of the likely depths of water over the 1 in 1 year, 1 in 30 year, and 1 in 100 year flood events. Chairman, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That was very clear and helpful, and thank you for your report as well, which explains things and shows how you have assessed the various issues. We have the applicant's agent here to speak, so I'd like to ask James Frith. So when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is James Firth, speaking on behalf of the applicant SJT Developments. The application site is located in a sustainable area of Bishop Stortford, which the council has identified as suitable for residential development. The application before you tonight has been the subject of a long process of close working with planning officers, taking into account consultation responses and bringing forward revisions to the scheme proposals. The scheme has been designed to respect trees on site, and which will provide a high quality setting for the new homes, and allows for the dedication of the more heavily wooded area to the eastern side of the site as a landscape, woodland and ecology area. The scheme provides for biodiversity net gain as a result of the proposals, and Herts Ecology support this strategy. Additional bat survey information in relation to some of the trees was requested, which has now been provided, and this confirms no bats are present. The applicant has worked with the council's conservation officer, including a site meeting, and made further changes to the scheme, including improvements to the elevation designs and the retention of the tree closest to Thorley House. The applicant is engaged with the council and affordable housing providers and has provided financial information to support a commuted sum financial obligation to be used towards affordable housing. There is no objection from the Highways Authority, and revisions have been made to the tracking of the access during the application period to ensure this is fully acceptable. The internal layout has also been tracked to ensure this works for refuse and recycling. A renewables plan has been provided showing locations for EV charging, air source heat pumps and solar panels. The proposals provide an important contribution towards housing choice in a sustainable location and will be provided to a high quality. I would therefore respectfully request that you support your officer's recommendation and resolve to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Firth. Thank you for coming to the committee. So members, it's questions and comments, please. Councillor Marlowe.
First of all, I must admit a certain sentimental approach to this because I grew up opposite this site. In the 60s, used to fly gliders around it, and should any be found, should this application go through, could they be returned via the council to me? Seriously, I'd just like to get a grip of where this site actually sits. Is it actually sitting wholly within Bish 5, or does it sit straddling it? What is it? Where is it?
Thank you, Chairman. That's a good question in the sense of there is a little bit of differing information on it in some of the policy documents, but I can confirm it is not within Bish 5. It has not been allocated as part of Bish 5, so it is separate and unallocated.
Okay, and so do you mind, Chair, if I carry on? I've got a few questions.
Please.
Therefore, this group of 9 dwellings, do we need them in terms of our 5-year supply? Are they vital to that?
Chairman, as members will be aware, the council has recently published its housing position on land supply and has in excess of 5 years housing supply. But I think it is important to take into account that the 5-year supply is a minimum. It's not a maximum. So and it's important that applications which accord with policies are approved to continue to add to that 5-year supply as we move forward, because that's essential in order to maintain that 5-year supply.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to come on to something that's written in the plan for Bish 5, which talks about encouraging non-car travel 2.17, achieving safe dedicated crossing points are a key objective of officers who are working closely with site promoter, and I assume you would have been doing so with this particular site promoter. That road is quite a road to go up and down, and if you're a pedestrian getting across that road to, say, for instance, and we're promoting walking, I guess, to the bus stops on the London road heading north into Bishop Stortford and south is quite a trek. It would seem to me that there needs to be some thinking around how we get people to walk down to those sites. Now, I'm thinking not so much of the residents of this particular development as they initially get there, but as they grow up and they've got families and teenagers who may or may not want to get to schools, get to clubs, get to wherever in the town, and I'm assuming we don't want to promote mums and dads driving them, we want them to take public transport. This site doesn't look like it's particularly well set out for the use of public transport, and I just wondered where you were with that kind of thinking on this.
Chairman, I think that's a good point in terms of the wider area. But of course, this is a scheme for 9 dwellings, and there's a limitation in terms of what the council can look for on a scheme of this size. And typically, in a situation like this, you wouldn't really be able to justify anything particular in terms of encouraging non-based car travel, or trying to reduce car travel, should I say. There is a crossing point right next to the site area, site entrance, so occupants of this development would be able to cross the road, or should be able to cross the road relatively easily. But it's difficult for a development of this scale to justify any other measures which aren't already coming forward as part of the St James's Park development.
Yeah, I have to take a little bit of issue. That's not a zebra crossing, though, is it? Or a pelican crossing? It's just it's neither one thing nor the other, and it doesn't look very, very safe to me from the outside. And the other part of this is I've been looking at what appears to be a plan of the site, which doesn't appear to have any pavements in it. Is that right?
Chairman, again, I think it's a situation for a small development, which, and bearing in mind the configuration of the development, vehicle speeds are likely to be quite low.
Yeah, but I'm sort of thinking in terms of, say I was a friend of one of the residents there and I was walking my pram with the baby down onto that estate to visit somebody there. There doesn't appear to be a pavement to walk, perambulate on.
Do you mean within the development?
Within the development itself. I might be reading what I'm looking at wrong.
So is it as like a single surface?
It's a shared space within the development, so there aren't any dedicated pavements within the development. But typically for this size of development, I'd say that's not that unusual. There are pavements on Whittington Way leading in front of St James's Park, so pedestrians would be able to walk into the development quite safely. And once there, because of the small number of houses and the configuration of development, normally this type of development, it's not uncommon to see shared space in this a scheme for 9 dwellings. Shared space is often the approach that would be taken.
Okay, and I've got one final point. Oh, sorry, Neil. Yeah, go.
Yeah, sorry, councillor. Yeah, we've taken advice on this from the county's highways officer, as well as our urban design team. And as often the case with detailed applications, we are striking the balance between the quality of the design, the appearance of the development, landscaping that's provided, and public safety, highway safety, and all of those are factors that we've taken advice on. And so the Highways Authority in this instance have advised that the number of properties is sufficiently low to support a shared surface layout for this type of development. And so in their minds, that doesn't give rise to excessive amounts of vehicle movements or additional highways safety or hazard issues. And so from a safety perspective, the officer's advice is clear and unambiguous, that we're acting on that advice in recommending this scheme. And in terms of the design, there may be other questions on that from members in due course, but there is a balance that's been struck here between the quality of the environment and highway safety, public safety of visitors, including pedestrians, cyclists and car drivers.
So picking up on one of these points, the principle is clear from your report, and there's consultation response from the Highway Authority. But we heard earlier that sometimes islands are made big enough so you can stand there with a bike, and I think the point is well made about walking and cycling from those 9 houses in towards town. Is that something that could be done as an informative, or I mean, no, it probably can't be a condition, but.
Chairman, of course, there is an existing island there, and so that is there to be used now. Whether it's wide enough for someone to stand with a bike, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Certainly, it would be possible to put an informative. I think that perhaps is a need to be mindful of the viability position with this development. Whereby that is quite tight, but there would be no harm in certainly putting an informative to ask for that to be explored.
Yeah.
Councillor Marlowe, do you want to carry on?
Yes, just one last, and that's about our current bête noire around section 106. Could I just be clear? I think you said the section 106 is for East Herts district, so not specifically to Bishop Stortford. Can I just clarify that?
Can I just come in here to explain? The financial contribution in lieu of on-site provision is actually put into a district-wide usage, because £100,000 might seem a lot of money, but it's not when you come to actually provide affordable housing. We work with the registered providers, the housing associations across the district, to contribute towards their schemes to actually improve and obtain greater numbers of social housing. The reason we actually say district-wide is to allow for things that actually are happening potentially on the edges of towns. So, you know, we try to actually have something that we can actually use the money, rather than being left with £100,000 that doesn't actually wouldn't actually provide enough affordable housing. And we're sat there with it just in a pot if we don't have any other contributions in that town.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense to me. I'd just like to correct you. I don't think it's a great deal of money for this site, to be honest, but that's...
No, I actually meant when you come to actually provide affordable housing, you are talking hundreds of thousands of pounds to actually provide a significant number.
Yeah.
So the 100,000 itself from this development is a substantial contribution, and we're happy to take it. We would always want more, but you know, this is what we have, and to actually put it into a district-wide use means that we can actually allocate it and use it.
Thank you.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there's not someone from Highways here now, but referring to I believe that the ward councillor's reasoning for bringing and requesting this to come to the committee regarding the access, specifically regarding the view that it would be dangerous for vehicles, especially to leave the site during high road usage during rush hour. It was mentioned due to visibility that cars would be sat within the road in order to leave, especially when passing over to the opposite side. Is this something that has been considered, and something that I believe that's probably been looked into, but just any clarification whether this has, just as this was the reason it was referred to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Could I pass that over to you?
Chairman, I do know the Highway Authority have looked at this in quite a lot of detail. I know that there were some initial concerns expressed from the Highway Authority, mainly about detail and some of the detail points of the access, but subject to further revisions and amendments. The Highway Authority did respond and say that they have no objections to the development, are happy for it to proceed. Chairman, I think it's also important to note that the traffic generation from this development is in the overall context quite small. It's set out in the report. My laptop has gone a bit slow, so I can't quote the figures, but I seem to remember it was 4 movements in the AM peak and the PM peak, and I think it's about 40 movements overall on average per day, which in the overall context of traffic in that area is small. And I think on that basis, the Highway Authority have taken the view that actually, given the size of the development, it won't have any significant noticeable impact on the highway.
I noticed from the report that it's 33 parking spaces for 9 houses. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. I want to sort of pick up on something Councillor Marlowe just said, that £100,000 doesn't seem a huge amount of money. We started off with 3 houses, 35%, gone from 3 affordable houses to £100,000. It doesn't seem to quite. Can the officers just explain how they get to that 100,000 place?
And to add to that, could you also say how many houses would £100,000 buy?
Chairman, certainly I can explain the process in terms of the viability assessment. I mean, the applicant did submit a lot of viability detail, which the council asked a viability expert to consider. And that's really a consideration of a number of different factors. Build cost is very much a part of that. And I mean, it's set out in a lot of detail in the report, but in essence, using the applicant's build cost figures would give a negative return on the development, i.e. a loss. There is the viability assessor did say, well, look, perhaps there is a slightly different way of doing this, which may give rise to a small surplus, which could be used for affordable housing. There is a difference of opinion between the applicant and the council's viability assessor on what exactly the build costs are likely to be. But what we've sought to do is negotiate a position where we're sort of halfway between the two views, if you like, which in the context of this scheme actually does appear reasonable. And in discussing this in a bit more detail with the council's viability assessor, his view is actually if the council is able to secure a contribution of £100,000, that is actually a good outcome in this particular case. And on that basis, the reports before you setting out that actually, given the viability issues with the development, and the fact it's a small development where viability is always going to be difficult in a lot of cases, because you just don't have the scale and the economies of scale as you would on a larger development, that actually this scheme is proposing a reasonable contribution to affordable housing, which can be used to provide affordable housing within the district. How many units it will provide, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question. But clearly, in the context of building houses, it's not a huge amount of money, but I suspect in most of these cases it will be added to other sums that come together to overall, and there might be a development somewhere that needs a bit of grant funding, affordable housing, which the money that is secured can be used towards.
Thank you. Yes, just a bit more to add to that, actually, for Councillor Devonshire. It's already been alluded to, but the applicant has initially explored how they could deliver affordable housing within the site, and so we've moved towards that contribution as a last resort. Well, in fact, they didn't offer provision to begin with, and so the fact that we had to move from no provision to potentially considering how you could accommodate it on the site to a contribution is probably fair to say that we've arrived at that contribution as a last case resort after exploring other alternative avenues to secure as much affordable housing as possible.
Councillor Watson.
If you could just explain on 8.38, it talks about the applicant assessment was that the scheme is financially unviable. I mean, is that why does that influence the contribution of 100,000?
Yes, Chairman. I mean, I think inevitably these, in terms of looking at viability issues, if certain inputs are tweaked, you can get slightly different outcomes. But the applicant's evidence is that based on their costs that they anticipate, it would be unviable. But of course, you're always looking forward with this type of assessment to the point of construction, and so inevitably there is some uncertainty with some of these things. But yes, you're absolutely right. That is the reason why we've got to the point where we've got to, and I think that's part of the reason why the council's viability assessor is advising the council that actually, if the council can secure a financial contribution of £100,000 in the context of this development, that would be a good outcome for the authority.
I believe I think we're hearing some points of principle here. In terms of the context of this development, we've heard that it's not part of BISH 5. So this is a windfall site, and the houses that are provided add, and it's welcome because our numbers are minimum, but it's not part of that strategy of providing new housing, which we put a lot of impetus behind through the plan. So as a windfall site with 9 houses, where it's not possible to put affordable housing on the site, the SPD says it should be 5, equivalent to 5 houses. And it seems to me that 100,000 might be 1.25 houses. If you think about 75, 80,000 to build a small house, that's probably about right. That is a long way off 5. I think another point of principle is that the council has its own advisor, and we should follow our own advisor's advice. It's not a trading situation. So I understand what's being said about, if you're being offered, take it. But I want to ask members whether we should be holding tight to the SPD. Councillor Stowe?
The point I would make is that, is there a possibility that this can be reviewed as the site proceeds, as we do on some sites, and that then will perhaps increase the amount we get? I mean,
I think it's a welcome suggestion, certainly on most strategic major development sites. However, we are reviewing a scheme for 9 dwellings, and so that doesn't really give much time to allow the market to change. And so I think it is a very good suggestion on the most part, but for the scheme that's on the table for members today, a review mechanism probably wouldn't be justified and probably wouldn't meet the tests. So fortunately, we probably couldn't recommend that in this.
well, coming from a sort of design and development background, I find it hard to believe that the developer has a site, he wants to build out, but if he wants to pay his contribution as we require for social housing, it would be a loss. So my argument would be, why is he ever developing the site at all? I certainly would walk away from it.
Councillor Watson?
I mean, as far as I can see it, there's been independent assessment, and the independent assessor has looked at it and suggested this 100,000, which parties have agreed to. It seems a reasonable, fair way of looking at it.
Can I ask then, is that what the independent assessor said, or was this a compromise? I thought the independent assessor had a different answer.
Chairman, I think the independent assessor gave a potential range for a surplus in terms of from the development which could be used towards affordable housing. But I think he was also conscious that the current condition of the market and perhaps headwinds in the housing market, and so taking into account his view on costs, the applicant's views on costs, he certainly was very clear that as I said before, the contribution that is being put forward is good in terms of this scheme. Again, it would be possible to perhaps do more work on the cost side of things. That might not give such a figure that's being proposed now. It may give a slightly higher figure. I think there would be an element of risk to, if you like, undertake more detailed work in terms of the costs, simply because the outcome of that work would be uncertain. And what we sought to do is negotiate a reasonable position which would hopefully allow the development to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Marlowe?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, I'd want to be pretty tight on this and go for as much as we can possibly get. That's just my view.
So, councillor Hill?
So yeah, just on the cost thing, I mean, when you look at data from financial markets, the profit per house built in the UK has increased every year for about the last 20 years. So I do struggle to see why I think every development that's come in front of us has used cost as an issue to reduce those payments. But that's just a general point.
Thank you, councillor Hill. Councillor Dunlop, finally.
Maybe you were trying to answer my question there, but if we had a completely different format of houses, could we not then subsequently make more affordable houses out of them? And genuinely affordable houses as opposed to affordable houses?
We have to deal with what's in front of us, so we're just dealing with that. So we're
But we
making a
do have
decision.
the
I mean,
opportunity to reject
there's
based on that.
So that wouldn't be a reason for rejecting this, because we're looking at the merits of this particular scheme. But so the fact that it could be developed in a different way, that can't be a reason, because that's not proposed in front of us for determination. So it's the questions that other members have been raising that we have to think about. Connolly?
This is completely different, but I don't really want to let it go. There's condition 14 gives a method to assess the noise output of the air source heat pumps. It could be seen as a barrier to using air source heat pumps in the future on other estates, because it's actually simpler than this methodology implies. The air source heat pump noise limit in this country is 42 decibels at your neighbour's boundary. An easier way would be to get the developer to tell us, work out the noise output, calculate the distances to the boundaries from where they're locating it, and tick the box. At a site like that, they're absolutely not going to have any problem at all. Manufacturers are making the pumps now to deal with this noise limit in much denser developments. So I don't think we need to get that complicated, and if we do get that complicated, we're making a barrier to the future of air source heat pumps.
Thank you, Councillor Hill.
Sorry, Chair, just through you briefly, mindful of the time, under the Constitution, we must conclude by 10, unless the committee resolved to do otherwise to a later time. So unless this debate's about to wrap very quickly, we'll need to do that.
Thanks. Councillor Adams? No, carry on, please.
Sorry, yeah, I must admit I'm overall frustrated with this, because I think it should have been included as part of Bish 5. And I think part of the reason why it wasn't, I bet you he got a better land deal. I bet you he got a better choice of houses. And then I also look at the footpath here and I'm thinking, well, the footpath doesn't go down there. So who's going to pick up that cost? Is it going to be the public purse that picks up the cost for a private estate or not? So I'm a bit irritated by this. I'm not saying it, for me it should or shouldn't go ahead. It just seems it's contrived, and I don't feel comfortable with it.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I'm going to move to the decision, and the recommendation is that planning permission. Councillor Stowe.
Sorry, I would like to ask one point. In condition 3, which it talks about the new access, I would like something added in that the existing access needs to be stopped up and curbed before the first occupation.
So I'm going to suggest that the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions set out below, and the satisfactory conclusion of a legal agreement is outlined, with a change to stopping up the existing access, making condition 14 less deterring, and there was another thing that I can't understand my squiggle. So can I see Those in favour? Oh, sorry,
I'll propose it.
councillor Watson, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Devonshire. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? So that's granted permission. So the 9 houses granted permission subject to those conditions. Thank you very much, members. So now we go on to the next item. We have 3 minutes. So these are, we're noting appeals decided in January, February, and then appeals that have been lodged in January and February this year. And we have hearing dates, and we're noting the performance of the LPA in determining applications, where we see that there's a consistent performance well above the government targets. So do we note those reports?
Noted.
Thank you. So is there any other urgent business? Thank you. So members, we conclude the meeting, finish the meeting at 9:58. Thank you.